The room was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy kind that makes your chest feel tight. I could hear the slow ticking of the wall clock, each second stretching longer than the last. My hands were shaking in my lap, even though I kept telling myself to stay calm. Across the table, my family sat straight and confident, dressed in black, acting like they already knew how this would end. I felt small in that room, like I always did. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Papers rustled. My Aunt Margaret leaned toward my cousin Emily and whispered something that made her smile. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were thinking. They were thinking about money, about houses, about who would get what. No one was thinking about Grandma Eleanor, and no one was thinking about me. I stared at the wooden table and took a slow breath. My heart was beating so fast I thought everyone could hear it. I didn't belong there, and they made sure I always remembered that. For 10 years, they had called me the charity case. 10 years of jokes, side looks, and fake kindness. I came to this meeting expecting nothing. I told myself I was only here for closure. Then the lawyer said my name, Genesis. The sound of it cut through the room like a blade. My head lifted so fast my neck hurt. Aunt Margaret's smile disappeared. Emily's eyes widened. Even Uncle Richard stopped tapping his pen. For the first time, every face turned toward me. The lawyer paused again, and in that moment, my whole life flashed in my mind. Every insult. Every time I was reminded that I owed them. Every dinner where I felt like a guest instead of family. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to run. But my body stayed frozen in the chair. And before he could continue, my mind pulled me back. Far away from that room, my name is Genesis. I am 29 years old. And for most of my life, I was the girl my own family looked down on. It started when I was 19. My father had just passed away, and everything in my life fell apart at once. My mother, Laura, did her best, but she was drowning in grief. We had no money, no support, and nowhere else to go. That was when Grandma Eleanor took us in. She opened her home without hesitation. She never called it charity. But the rest of the family did at first. The comments were small, quiet, easy to ignore. Be grateful. Genesis. Don't ask for too much. Then they became jokes. Laughing at my clothes. Laughing at my dreams. Laughing at the fact that I had nothing of my own. Every smile felt sharp. Every word left a mark. I learned to stay quiet. I learned to sit still and not take up space. I learned how to swallow my pride and pretend it didn't hurt. But it did. It hurt every single day. Grandma Eleanor was the only one who never treated me like I was less. She watched everything. She listened, and she never forgot. I didn't know it then. Sitting in that silent room with my name still hanging in the air. I had no idea that my life was about to change forever. After my father died, nothing felt solid anymore. Our house was sold within months. Bills piled up faster than my mother could open them. I still remember the night she sat at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of envelopes, her hands shaking the same way mine did years later at the will reading. I was 19, scared, and trying to be strong for her, even though I didn't know how. Grandma Eleanor was the one who saved us. She told us to come live with her, no questions asked. Her house smelled like old books and lavender. It felt safe. For a moment, I believed things might be okay. But safety came with a price. The rest of the family didn't see us as guests. They saw us as a burden. Aunt Margaret made that clear on our first night there. She smiled while she spoke, but her eyes were cold. "You're lucky your grandmother is so generous," she said, setting plates on the table. Not everyone would take in extra mouths. Extra mouths. That's how it started. At first, I tried to be perfect. I cleaned more than anyone asked. I stayed quiet. I said thank you too many times. I thought if I behaved well enough, they would stop looking at me like I didn't belong. But nothing was ever enough. When my cousin Emily got new clothes, she showed them off at dinner. When I wore the same sweater for the third time that week, she laughed. "Don't worry," she said once loud enough for everyone to hear. "Genesis can't help it. She's our little charity case." The table went quiet. Then someone chuckled. No one corrected her. I felt my face burn. I wanted to disappear under the table. My mother looked down at her plate, silent. That silence hurt more than the words. From that day on, the labels stuck. Every mistake I made was proof that I didn't deserve help. If I spoke up, I was ungrateful. If I stayed quiet, I was weak. Aunt Margaret reminded me often how much Grandma was spending on me. Uncle Richard liked to joke about how I should pay everyone back someday. Even family gatherings felt like a test I was always failing. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the way they looked at me, like I was temporary, like I should be thankful for scraps. Only Grandma Eleanor treated me like I mattered. Late at night, she would sit with me in the living room while everyone else slept. She never asked me to explain myself. She just listened. You're stronger than they think, she told me once, squeezing my hand. Don't let them shrink you. I wanted to believe her. But when you hear the same thing for long enough, you start to believe it's true. I started seeing myself the way they saw me. Less than dependent. Replaceable. Years passed like that. I grew older, but the label never did. I was still the charity case. Still the girl who owed everyone. Still the one they whispered about. What I didn't know was that while they were busy judging me, Grandma Eleanor was watching them, quietly, carefully, and she was remembering everything. 10 years is a long time to carry a name that isn't yours. I didn't choose to be called the charity case, but after hearing it for so long, it followed me everywhere. Even when no one said it out loud, I could feel it sitting on my shoulders. Heavy and constant. I tried to build a life anyway. I worked part-time while studying. I saved every small amount I could. I told myself that one day I would leave that house and never look back. But every time I took a step forward, my family found a way to remind me where they thought I belonged. When I got my first decent job, I was proud. I came home smiling, holding my offer letter like it was something fragile and precious. At dinner, I shared the news. Aunt Margaret raised an eyebrow. Well, that's nice, she said. But don't get too comfortable. You still owe this family a lot. Just like that, my joy disappeared. Uncle Richard laughed and added, maybe now our charity case can finally start paying rent. Everyone laughed again. Everyone except Grandma Eleanor. She didn't say a word. She just looked at me, her eyes soft but sad, like she knew how deep those words cut. Later that night, she knocked on my bedroom door and handed me a cup of tea. Don't let them steal your happiness, she said quietly. I nodded, but inside I was tired. Tired of proving myself. Tired of shrinking. Tired of pretending I didn't care. Family gatherings became harder as the years passed. Birthdays, holidays. Every event felt like a reminder that I was different. Emily would talk loudly about her trips and shopping sprees. Margaret would brag about her investments. And I would sit there smiling politely, knowing they saw me as the poor relative who should be. Grateful just to be included. Sometimes I wondered if leaving would make it stop. But then I would think about Grandma. She was the only reason I stayed. The only reason I endured the looks, the jokes, the quiet cruelty. As Grandma got older, things changed. Not for the better. Suddenly, the same people who mocked me began hovering around her. Aunt Margaret called her every day. Uncle Richard visited with gifts and forced smiles. Emily offered to help with paperwork she never cared about before. They spoke in soft voices, but their eyes were sharp. Money was in every conversation. In every pause. I saw it clearly then. They weren't kind. They were calculating. One night I found Grandma sitting alone in the living room, staring at an old photo album. She looked smaller than before, frailer. I sat beside her and rested my head on her shoulder like I used to when I was younger. They think I don't see, she said suddenly. Her voice was calm but firm. I froze. See what? I asked Dot. She turned to me and smiled, the kind of smile that holds both warmth and truth. Everything. In that moment, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen. I didn't know what Grandma was planning. I didn't know what she had written down or decided in her quiet moments. All I knew was this: for 10 years, I had been silent, and soon, that silence was going to speak louder than any insult they had ever thrown at me. Grandma Eleanor's health began to fade slowly, like a candle burning down to its final glow. At first, it was small things. She forgot where she placed her glasses. She moved more carefully. Then, one morning, she couldn't get out of bed without help. The house that once felt full of her presence started to feel hollow. That was when my family changed. Aunt Margaret suddenly had time. She cooked meals she never cooked before. Uncle Richard visited more often, always talking loudly about family unity. Emily acted sweet, offering to help Grandma with her medications, even though she had never shown interest before. Their kindness felt forced, like a performance. And somehow, I was the only one who noticed. I stayed close to Grandma. I helped her bathe. I read to her when her eyes grew tired. At night, when the house went quiet, I sat by her bed and listened to her breathe, afraid of the moment it might stop. Those were the moments when she was most honest. One evening, she asked me to open the window. The air was cool and the sunset painted the room in soft orange light. She reached for my hand, her grip weaker than before but still steady. "Genesis," she said, "do you know why I never stopped watching?" I swallowed hard. "Because you cared," I whispered. She smiled. "I watched because I wanted to know who you would become when no one was clapping for you." That sentence stayed with me. She told me she had seen every insult, every joke, every quiet moment where I was pushed aside. She said nothing then, not because she didn't care, but because she believed time would reveal truth better than arguments ever could. "You stayed kind," she said, even when they weren't. A few days later, she asked me to sit with her alone. The door was closed. The house was quiet. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were clear. "Whatever happens after I'm gone," she said, "do not fight them. Do not beg. Let the truth speak for itself." Tears rolled down my face. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but something told me not to. Some answers are meant to arrive in their own time. The night she passed, the house felt empty in a way I had never known. My family cried loudly. Too loudly. I cried silently, holding her pillow, breathing in the last trace of lavender. It felt like the only person who truly saw me was gone. After the funeral, everything became cold and distant. Conversation stopped when I entered the room. Papers appeared on tables. Phone calls were made in hushed voices. I knew what was coming. The will. I didn't want to attend the reading. I already knew my place in this family. I expected a small mention, maybe nothing at all. I prepared myself for disappointment the way I had for years. The morning of the will reading, I almost stayed behind. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my tired eyes, my simple black dress. For a moment, I saw the girl they had labeled for 10 years. Then I heard Grandma's voice in my head. "Let the truth speak for itself." So I went. I walked into that room with nothing but memories and quiet strength. I sat down, folded my hands, and said nothing. I didn't know that Grandma Eleanor had already said everything for me. And soon. The world my family had built on pride and cruelty was about to crack wide open. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and dust. The chairs were stiff, the walls bare, and yet everyone in that room acted like they owned the place already. Aunt Margaret sat closest to the desk, her back straight, her hands folded like she was in control. Uncle Richard leaned back with confidence. Emily kept checking her phone, trying and failing to hide her excitement. I sat near the end of the table, quiet, invisible. Just like always, the lawyer began reading the will in a calm, steady voice. At first, everything sounded exactly as my family expected. Small amounts to distant relatives. Donations to charities Grandma had always supported. Each name made Margaret nod in approval, as if she had written the will herself. Then the tone changed. The lawyer paused and looked down at the papers again. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. At this point, he said, Eleanor requested that a personal letter be acknowledged. Aunt Margaret frowned. A letter? She asked sharply. Yes, the lawyer replied. To be read aloud, My heart started beating faster. He unfolded a separate page and began to read Grandma's words. Her voice lived in every sentence, calm, clear, unshaken. She wrote about family, about kindness, about how money reveals who people truly are. She wrote about watching silently year after year. As one person was treated as less than the rest, I felt my throat tighten. Then he read my name, Genesis. The room shifted. I could feel it. Chairs moved. Breaths caught. Grandma's letter spoke of my patience, my strength. The way I stayed when leaving would have been easier. She wrote that I never asked for more than respect, and even that was often denied to me. Aunt Margaret stood up. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. She influenced her. She's always played the victim. The lawyer raised his hand. "Please sit down," he said firmly. "I'm not finished." He continued reading. Grandma wrote that the house, her savings, and the majority of her estate were to be left to me. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Emily's face went pale. Uncle Richard laughed once, sharp and empty. "This has to be a mistake," he said. "Genesis doesn't even know how to handle that kind of responsibility." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The lawyer calmly slid documents across the table. Signatures, dates, everything legal, everything final. Aunt Margaret's voice shook with anger. "She was just a charity case," she said. "That's all she ever was." The lawyer looked up at her, his voice calm but firm. "No," he said. "According to Eleanor, she was the only one who never treated her generosity like a debt." That sentence broke something in the room. I felt tears in my eyes, but I stayed still. I didn't smile. I didn't argue. I simply listened as the truth settled into the air, heavy and unavoidable. For 10 years they had spoken over me. That day, Grandma spoke for me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the smallest person in the room. I was the one they could no longer ignore. After the will reading ended, no one spoke to me. Not right away. They gathered their coats. Papers were shoved into bags. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor. The same people who once laughed at me couldn't even look me in the eyes. Aunt Margaret walked past me like I wasn't there. Uncle Richard muttered something under his breath. Emily stared at me with a mix of anger and disbelief, like she was still waiting for someone to tell her this was a joke. But no one did. I stayed seated until the room emptied. The lawyer asked if I was okay. I nodded, even though my chest felt tight and my legs were weak. When I finally stood, I felt different. Not powerful. Not proud. Just lighter. Like something heavy I had carried for 10 years had finally been set down. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. Phone calls came in waves. Some were angry. Some were fake apologies. Aunt Margaret said Grandma had been confused. Uncle Richard warned me that money changes people, as if I hadn't already lived that truth. A few relatives tried to reconnect, suddenly warm and polite. I didn't argue with any of them. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. I moved out of the house a few months later. Not because I was pushed out, but because I was finally free to choose. I kept Grandma's room exactly the same for a while. Her books. Her chair. The small framed photo of us when I was 19, both of us smiling at the camera. Unaware of everything still to come, I used the inheritance carefully. No sudden spending. No loud announcements. I paid off debts. I went back to school. I built a life that felt steady and honest. The kind of life Grandma believed I deserved, sometimes late at night. I would sit by the window and think about the girl I used to be. The one who stayed quiet to survive. The one who believed the cruel names people gave her. I wish I could reach back through time and tell her this being patient is not the same as being weak. Being kind does not mean you deserve cruelty. And silence does not mean you have no voice. My family still talks about that day. I hear it through others. Some say Grandma was unfair. Some say I was lucky. Some still call me the charity case behind closed doors. But their words don't follow me anymore. They belong to them now, Grandma. Eleanor once told me that time reveals truth better than arguments ever could. she was right. She didn't give me revenge in the loud, dramatic way people expect. She gave me something better. She gave me dignity. If this story made you feel something, you've ever been treated as less by the people who should have protected you, I want you to know this. Your worth is not decided by the people who look down on you. Sometimes, the quiet ones are the strongest. If you connected with this story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments or share your own story. You're not alone. And remember, the truth always finds its moment to be heard.